Cowboy Bebop is an anime classic and for very strong reasons. I was hearing about Bebop before really caring to know what anime even was. It's the kind of series that borrows influence from Western series and directors while at the same time doing its own unique style that brings the old folk blues to a space adventure in ways I haven't seen any series do before. You don't even have to wait for the end of this review for me to tell you that I think it's a timeless classic, but it is important that I showcase why I, like many, feel this way. The story of Cowboy Bebop is rather a simple one. Spike Spiegel and the gang travel across the galaxy as bounty hunters and try to make ends meet in doing so. While that does accurately represent the story for a good chunk of the episode count, it is more than just that. It's a personal story that deals with revenge, love, loss, and hopes for a brighter future. Each of the focal characters have ran away from something, are fighting for someone or something. And with each story we complete, we learn more about them and what led them to be who they currently are, but also who they can now become due to the company that they now keep. One of the strongest opinions I see towards Bebop is if someone says they tried the show and couldn't get into it, is to try giving Ballad of the Fallen Angels a shot before making a final judgment. This is the show's 5th episode, which shifts the tone drastically, and what you see for the first 4 episodes isn't even comparable to what's seen here. And I'm not going to say that this recommendation hasn't gotten a fair amount of current Bebop fans to change their minds on the show from a negative to a positive one, but I've personally disagreed with this recommendation for as long as I can remember. My first viewing of the show, I wasn't the biggest fan outside of some key episodes and anything revolving around Vicious, a mysterious man from Spike's past. I eventually changed my mind when I rewatched the show later and didn't have fans breathing down my neck telling me I had to worship this as an all-time best series like most people seem to view it as. But even during that initial viewing, I appreciated the twist that episode 5 delivered. Up to that point, it was fun bounty hunting, but it didn't feel as if there was many stakes for the central characters. There was death and blood surrounding them, sure, but the emotional weight wasn't there, at least for myself. Then when this classic scene starts playing, my interest in Bebop skyrocketed, because I wasn't expecting that. From the music to the directing, I thought, wow, this must be why people love this show. Every time I caught an episode that wasn't my favorite, I knew there had to be more episodes, such as episode 5. So I kept watching knowing the series could blow me away. Skipping the first 4 to later go back to them, to me feels as if the impact and journey wouldn't hit you the same way it did for me, which is why I believe this story was placed where it was for a very specific reason, and a first-time watcher shouldn't tamper with this brilliant direction. But obviously, do whatever is most comfortable for you and will get you to experience this wonderful series. Cowboy Bebop is a series where a good chunk of the episodes could be viewed as standalone stories, where with no knowledge on who any of these characters are, you'll leave having had a fun time overall. But the thing I really appreciate about this anime is how all the characters I see pop up episode by episode. Even if I have a negative first impression, by the time the series wraps up, I can't help but love each and every one of them. When I first met Ed, the crazy intelligent girl who probably would blow up the Bebop if you didn't keep an eye on her, I thought she was too extreme and one note, and I was very wrong, and I have no issues admitting to that. Ed is the kind of character who seems so in her own world and is more of a tag-along object than a developing character. But when Ed is incorporated to a story, you notice that at multiple points, whether it be with the skills of technology to how she fumbles her way into the answer, without Ed's bouncy personality, this cast would have lacked a fun element to help keep the rest from just being dull characters, while also having these very unique and important skills that the crew desperately needs. You just never forget about Ed, and that's never a bad thing. You have Jett, the former cop turned bounty hunter who's been traveling with Spike for some time. His English voice actor plays a huge factor into why I adore him as much as I do, because he really is the dad of the group who lets you break your curfew with no real punishment, but is one of Spike's biggest foils throughout the episodes. From time to time he does things for himself, but the role he plays is more than just the pilot or cook of the group. He's the kind of man who's dealt with criminals and bounty hunters all his life. He knows what leads people to do the things they do, both the good and the bad, but he also knows how to give advice to heal a tense person overall. Now that isn't to say he isn't with his own faults, and he does need support at multiple points throughout the run of Cowboy Bebop, but without Jett, Spike and the rest would have died probably pretty early on. If you look at Spike and Faye, they are rash and act out for their own desires on more than one occasion, and Papa Jett has to come in and clean up the mess or take them home, with the odd time them actually needing to carry Jett back home. He's a damn kind soul, but he isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Out of the central character, he feels the most normal, as if he didn't have to be a bounty hunter, but something is keeping him there, and his relationship with Spike seems to be that reason, and it never gets old watching them bicker or connect. Faye Valentine is one of my favorite female characters across all of anime. Often sex appeal is just for gags or eye candy for the viewer, where with Faye, she knows how to rock her looks and keep herself on top. She knows she is attractive and she uses that quirk to manipulate easy prey. It does from time to time backfire, but she is someone who stands up for herself and thinks she needs no man. But fairly quickly, she recognizes, even if she won't admit it out loud, that Spike and Jett are men she wants in her life because the bond they have is something she desperately craves. A loner who seeks company, but in the world she lives in, the kind of company she craves is very hard to come across. I adore how Faye is someone who says how it is, doesn't hide her faults, and will throw them in your face. The kind of girl who will kick your ass on one day and care for your wounds on another. She's perfectly flawed and gets on your nerves, but whenever she's in trouble, you always want her to be saved. But of course, let's not forget about the man himself, Spike, the anime version of Bruce Lee. Now, if you took a poll of iconic anime characters, it's nearly guaranteed that Spike's name would come up, most likely in a top 10 more often than not. He's memorable from design to personality. You feel like he's a dancer, always moving, always saying something clever. Feels like he's carefree and in doing so living a life that we all want. That is, until the demons come out of his closet slowly. But surely, the past he runs away from, it always comes out to play. The relationship between him and a man named Vicious is the core element that never leaves my mind when I'm thinking about Cowboy Bebop. You really don't know all the finer details until the end of the show, which is still one of my favorite endings across all of the anime media. And whenever he pops up, the mystery surrounding their past and what fuels a Spike we rarely see that seems frightening and not joyful as we're typically used to is a great representation on why I love anime. It can be silly, it can be cute, but anime isn't just the memes people share around. It can be serious such as this. The reason all these characters work so well is because they are all flawed individuals. By themselves, they just wouldn't make it. Not even just that they might end up dead, but they most likely will just end up alone. What it means to be alive is an element that rings true throughout this story as a whole. So by the time the credits roll and the show comes to a conclusion, you're not mad it's over. You're happy the journey let the characters feel alive and find their purpose in their world. Not everyone gets a happy ending. Not everything just works out because a character is the main character. This is a real and breathing environment where the pain of humanity is always present, and it's why death and sorrow hurts us the same way it does to the characters. That when someone does say goodbye, we want to fight back. But everyone has the right to walk the path that they see fit and figure out, are they truly alive? And for each character, that answer will be different. Bebop has stories ranging from absurd to action-packed to emotionally heartbreaking. By themselves, they are entertaining and potentially tear-jerking, but in a 26-episode package under Watanabe's phenomenal direction, from the little details you think are disposable to the big punches that have your jaw on the floor, you see this mastermind always had something large planned, and everything was important one way or another, that without all these pieces snapping together, Bebop wouldn't be what it is today, allowing us to grow with one of the greatest casts of characters anime has ever seen, where fun personalities become the most human characters you'll ever meet. Which is why even after all these years, Bebop's name will still come up when people ask, what anime should I try next? Something I noticed upon my rewatch for this review of Bebop is how I missed old school anime with how they presented sci-fi. Look at any anime coming out nowadays that have a futuristic approach to them. They don't look like anything from the 90s and how they nailed that dirty aesthetic so flawlessly. Back when Bebop was made, not many people would be able to predict what communication devices or even computers would look like in the future. So despite them being so far into their future, you have clunky computers, giant communicators, and everything you can imagine pulled from the 80s and 90s, but made more futuristic, and I adore it. Which allows for Bebop from its very first episode to have a style and look that you immediately start missing when thinking about how the future is currently drawn and animated in modern anime. Now that's not to say I dislike modern anime visuals, in fact I adore them, but series like Bebop remind us why this forgotten art form may need to return to us every so often. Bebop is a dirty series in the best sense. The characters are bounty hunters, they get their hands dirty, and the style to the art nails this feeling. Muted colors, vibrant character models, all feeling like they were pulled from every corner of the galaxy. Rust and cracks along the ships and the characters. You feel like we are jumping into a world with a rich history, and the focal characters are not without their baggage. You don't look at Bebop and think happy characters with an easy route to bounty hunting. You see a world with its fair share of corruption, criminals, and the law typically isn't seen, and rules are meant to be broken. There's a gritty feeling to this show that from the 4:3 ratio that it was designed in, to the look of its world and its characters, it feels like rebels and bounty hunters, which I eat up every single episode. The animation for the time at certain points can be claimed to be revolutionary, with the rest feeling like some of the most polished action animation for anime of its time period. You of course have plenty of static shots with very little past a mouth flap moving, but most of any Bebop episodes move with a unique flow that I've always appreciated. From the framing of shots, the directing always knows how to capture your attention no matter what story was at play. And when Spike and the gang had to get more hands-on, the way their bodies moved around had a kinetic way of feeling like every punch or kick felt realistic, as if there was weight behind characters' actions, and they weren't just superhuman in combat unless they had some form of enhancement. Whenever I watched Spike fight, either with a gun or hand-to-hand, he moved like a real human, and when he was sluggish, it added on to the fights having a realistic weight behind them, with all the sci-fi elements having unique flares to capture this universe in a way you just don't get to see with modern anime anymore. This is the only anime that everyone that I've had long enough conversations with who just so happen to have watched Bebop have mostly agreed that the English dub is the only way to go when viewing this timeless classic. That really speaks numbers when the English dub is the mass opinion on how to view an anime coming from Japan, with all the Western influences the show pulls from, and how these characters feel so grounded to their ties of space exploration and martial arts. The way the English dub's cast get into their roles, it feels spectacular and nothing short of extraordinary. When you hear Steve Blum voice Spike, you're immediately gripped by his charisma. He seemingly is a jokester with no care in the world, but with every scene, depending on the situation at hand, he can make you laugh or make you feel fear when the wrong people get in his way. To Wendy Lee, who voices Faye Valentine, this is a character who knows how to rock it, use what she has to manipulate fools with her looks, but kicks all the ass. She has a way of delivering both a seductive voice that has a sense of care and compassion under many words, even if her actions may say otherwise. Every one of these characters, I feel as if we aren't listening to an actor, but someone a part of Bebop's world. There's time and effort put into the dub across the board, and though I'm not the biggest fan of dubs from this time period, you'll be hard pressed to find much competition for one of the best English dubs of all time from this time period than Cowboy Bebop's. But it's not just the dub that gets praised for its sound direction, it's also the music. If you watch enough Watanabe works, you'll quickly notice a very common trend. Music plays a huge factor for the storytelling. With Bebop and our space adventures, we range from the old folk blues letting us reminisce from the past, to thrashy or upbeat pieces to get our blood pumping for action sequences, but also the crushing sorrow with instrumentals that make you tear up, especially when certain tracks only pop up when we're digging up the past, letting us know emotional punches are coming our way. Every piece of music seen here is enjoyable to listen to as a standalone piece, but when incorporated into the story, whether it be silly or tear-jerking, it's exactly how musical direction should be designed. Something that tells a story. The script is of course amazing, but remove the music and many of these punches wouldn't have hurt as much as they did, because the soundtrack alongside the script told the story Bebop was aiming for, episode by episode. Bebop isn't a series that is perfect in every single aspect. For every person who loves this show, there's bound to be one who dislikes it. I myself typically don't enjoy episodic style series, but when you have a cast as strong as this, even weekly stories had me hooked. And when the vicious story comes into play, it's hard not to binge 12 episodes in a row. Can you find production missteps? Of course. Can you point out some of the stories that are more forgettable and not as impactful as ones such as Ballad of Fallen Angels? Obviously. But when you combine all the strong elements this show has going for it, and then you view the handful of minor issues that most people will point out, it feels like we're looking at breadcrumbs in comparison to the feast that is the show's strength. When I first watched Bebop, I wasn't the biggest fan. I did really enjoy it, but many of the episodes I found myself zoning out, which really wasn't to do with the story scene here, but me thinking it was this classic and I wasn't seeing what everyone else was in it. But when I rewatched it a couple years later, I noticed what others did all this time. A perfect cast of characters with distinct histories and personalities that bring these random stories I thought were disposable into memorable adventures. Even the silly stories, such as them fighting a monster from their fridge. Bebop is a classic by every right of the definition, and obviously it receives my ultimate seal of approval. If you have yet to see this staple of anime's history, be sure to watch it whenever you get a chance. Don't let the hype cloud your vision either. Wait until you have free time and no one is breathing down your neck, and I can assure you most will see what I and many others do in Cowboy Bebop. But hey, that's just my opinion anyway. But I'd love to hear yours. If you have any thoughts on Bebop or this video, down in that comment section below. If you did enjoy my ramblings, be sure to leave a like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. But lastly, there is also my Patreon for those who want to go the extra mile and help support what I do around here even more. That is, if you so wish. But until next time everyone, please take care, and have a good one.